All right, so the Timberwolves and Mavericks matched up in game one of the highly anticipated Western Conference Finals. And we saw the Mavericks come in and have a very impressive offensive performance against the top-ranked Timberwolves defense and steal one on the road. And that's kind of been a theme so far throughout this postseason is the road team getting a couple of big wins. We saw the Denver Nuggets drop a couple of wins at home in that first round or in that second round against the Timberwolves. The Timberwolves stole the first two games and stole the last game on the road. So it's been kind of a theme so far throughout this postseason. Some amazing offensive performances last night from Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. And the Minnesota Timberwolves defense realized very quickly that the Nuggets offense and the Mavericks offense are two completely different things. I'm not saying that to say that the Nuggets offense is worse than the Mavericks offense. I'm not saying that at all, but they just attack you in different ways. With the Nuggets, they're going to run a lot of their actions through Nikola Jokic, like a lot of pinch post actions where he's kind of able to make plays out of there, or they're going to run these two-man actions between Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. And for the Mavericks, they're going to have these two dynamic scoring point guards consistently coming at you and consistently attacking you and making your help defenders make decisions. Do we stay home or do we come and help? And if we come and help, Luka Doncic is going to punish us with these ridiculous skip passes to the weak corner and set up these corner threes who, you know, guys like PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. and even Josh Green off the bench, they're just amazing at being able to convert on those. That's how they were able to kind of kill Oklahoma City in that second round. So two different beasts on the offensive end between the Mavericks and the Nuggets. And as I said, the Wolves figured that out last night. So one of the biggest talking points going into this series was the matchup between Anthony Edwards and Kyrie. Anthony Edwards made it very apparent that Kyrie was going to be his primary defensive assignment. And last night we saw very quickly that Kyrie was going to have his way against Anthony Edwards. So now the question is, and this is a big conversation right now on social media, is it smart to have your best offensive player go out there and guard a player like Kyrie Irving? Because the thing last night was Ant went out there and guarded Kyrie, was unsuccessful, and on top of that, lost a ton of energy. So late in the fourth quarter, Ant really couldn't do much offensively, couldn't create his own look. So they were kind of deferring a lot to Karl-Anthony Towns, which just isn't the best. And I kind of get it, right? They didn't have much of a choice because Ant was just so gassed at that point. But like I said, it just brings this conversation to the table. Is it smart to have Ant go out there and guard Kyrie? Is it smart to have your best player, who may be a really good two-way player, go out there and guard a person who is just so lethal on the offensive end? And that's kind of a choice that coaches have been tasked with making for a very, very long time. So right now, and in general, over the last couple of years with the NBA, we see things like, oh, this guy's ducking this matchup. This player doesn't want to go out there and guard this player. We're not seeing superstars guarding superstars anymore, especially when they're playing the same position. It makes sense. As a coach, I really wouldn't want my best guy going out there and guarding the opposing team's best guy, because my best guy still has to give out a level of production on the offensive end. So it's better to put a defensive specialist and have a defensive specialist to go and guard him. We've seen that happen so many times in big playoff series before. 2021, the Bucks and the Nets matched up in the second round of the Eastern Conference playoffs. Giannis at this point was arguably the best defensive player in the NBA. Yet he didn't spend much time guarding Kevin Durant. Instead, they put PJ Tucker on KD. And that allowed Giannis to kind of play to his strengths a lot more defensively. But a lot of people were killing Giannis for not going out there and guarding Kevin Durant. We saw that also in the second round with the Timberwolves and the Nuggets. We saw it more with the big men, where they went with Karl-Anthony Towns, who's not much of a defensive specialist, but he was better in guarding Nikola Jokic relative to Rudy Gobert. And the Timberwolves found out that it was more beneficial to have that matchup because it allowed Rudy Gobert to roam a lot more, to protect the paint a lot more. And that's how the Timberwolves were able to stay confident defensively and pull it out in that series. So again, coaches are going to do certain things that don't look good all the time to fans, right, aesthetically. So it doesn't look better for Cat to guard Cat to guard Nikola Jokic than it does for Rudy Gobert to guard Nikola Jokic, but it just makes sense because it put Rudy Gobert in a better position on the defensive end, and it benefited the Timberwolves defense as a whole. So right now, the Wolves coaching staff has that same decision to make, just with the perimeter, just with the guards. Should we put somebody else on Kyrie instead of having Anthony Edwards guard Kyrie right now, right? So it doesn't gas Anthony Edwards by the time the fourth quarter rolls around, right? And he's able to play a little bit of a different role from a defensive standpoint. So that's just a decision coaches have had to make for a long time. We saw that happen in 1991. Jordan wasn't guarding Magic Johnson that series. They took Jordan off of Magic Johnson and put Scottie Pippen on Magic Johnson. So we've seen that happen a lot. It's not just like this new phenomenon where the best players aren't guarding the best players. Coaches time and time again have had to make that particular decision. Only issue is this: it's always going to come down to the fans' perception. If Ant doesn't guard Kyrie Irving and they put maybe more of, NAW on him, right, as his primary defensive player, and NAW does have some good moments defensively on Kyrie and is able to slow him down, people are going to kill Ant because they're going to be like, well, you're supposed to be this elite two-way player. You're supposed to be this great defender like you talk about, but you didn't go out there and guard Kyrie. How do I know it's going to happen? Because that's what happened to Rudy Gobert. The Timberwolves still won that series, but Gobert didn't guard Nikola Jokic. People killed Gobert. You're the four-time depoy. Why aren't you guarding Nikola Jokic? Why aren't you guarding the opposing team's best player? People are going to do that. And I think right now there are a lot of misconceptions about defense. As I said, for one, coaches are going to do what they can to put their team defense in the best position. So it may not make sense to have Ant guard Kyrie. Yes, Ant may be a really good defensive player, but does it make sense for us as a team to have him guarding Kyrie as his primary defender for most of the night? And also there's a general misconception on what a great defender is. So a lot of people think that a great defender is just shutting down your matchup. That's not always the case because certain players thrive in different defensive positions. Certain players are elite in different defensive positions. So there are like three main different types of defenders. You have great point of attack defenders. Those are your guys like your Kawhi Leonards and like your Scottie Pippens, if we're just going, general NBA history. Those are your players who are going to go out there and guard the opposing team's best player out there on the perimeter. A lot of times coaches are going to put defensive specialists in those types of positions, like your Patrick Beverleys. At a point in time in his career, PJ Tucker. Those are your elite, matchup defenders, especially out there on the perimeter. Then we have really, really good off-ball defenders, which I think Anthony Edwards was striving that type of role this series. They're able to make really good reads off the ball, playing help defense, kind of playing passing lanes, getting steals, making chase down blocks, tipping the ball away from drivers when they're in help position, kind of like LeBron in his prime, right? LeBron in his defensive prime wasn't an amazing point of attack defender, but he thrived the most as like this great off-ball defender, making those reads of the passing lanes and getting steals, chase down blocks, making recovery plays, those types of things, not necessarily shutting down his matchup, but just being a really, really good defensive playmaker. That's another way to kind of define that type of defender. Then we have your rim protectors, and those are your guys like Rudy Gobert and players like that. So there are three different types of defensive players, and each of those three can still be high impact in that particular regard. So kind of going back to that point I made about Giannis not guarding KD. At that time, I was like, why isn't he guarding KD? He's supposed to be the defensive player of the year and all of these things. We just learned, especially this season, Giannis doesn't thrive as a 1v1 defender. He doesn't thrive as a isolation defender. He hasn't done that at a high volume throughout his prime so far. He's making his highest impact defensively as more of a help defender, as more of a rim protector at times. Does that make him less of a better defender? Does that make him less of a defender in general? I don't think so. I think he just thrives in a certain position defensively and does so well in that position to where he provides a net benefit to his team in doing that. So with Anthony Edwards, this series, if he gets taken off of Kyrie and they find a more favorable matchup for Kyrie, it wouldn't be fair to criticize Ant's defense if he thrives more playing an off the ball role from a defensive standpoint, right? If that makes any sense. That's what I'm trying to get at is I think as fans, we need to perceive defense in a different way. It's not just being a great one-on-one defender, not just being a great point of attack defender. That is one way to be a high impact defender, but there are other ways. And with the Timberwolves, they've been good so far this postseason in doing that and making those decisions as to how do we get our best guys into position defensively to where they're able to thrive. So like I said, with Gobert, second round, it didn't make sense for him to guard Nikola Jokic because he provided more of a benefit to the team with his rim protection, with his ability to kind of roam and just kind of generally keep people out of the paint. So that kind of be the case here with Anthony Edwards out on the perimeter, right? Being put into a different position defensively. So we'll see what the Wolves do to adjust. As I said, I think they will. If they're able to figure out the Nuggets offense in that last round, they'll be able to figure out something for this Mavericks offense. As I said earlier, two different offenses, two different beasts, but I have faith in the Timberwolves coaching staff to figure that out at some point in time. So we'll see, but there are a lot of adjustments to be made, especially with those pick and roll coverages. But that's what's going to be fun about this series. You're kind of seeing the chess match between the coaches, especially here from Minnesota. We'll see just how dominant that defense is and judge that based on their ability to adjust moving forward as there are more changes presented to them based off of that Mavericks offense. So we shall see, but it should be really fun down the road to see how the rest of the series ends up wrapping out.